So you made your Bristol Academy debut, as it was known then, in 2009. How much do you think that the standard of football in the league has developed since then?
Massively. There's been such a huge change, probably mainly because of the fact that now teams are more professional. So in the past, people were working jobs outside of football. You can't fully commit to something if your priorities are elsewhere, if you're trying to earn money working, or a lot of the girls are in education but still can't really kind of be in a full-time football program because it wasn't joined at the time. It wasn't like you could go to the academies and it would work where you could coincide your football with actually training as a professional footballer. Whereas these days, it's a lot more professional. It's now a job, isn't it, that you can do. So I think with that comes more training, more time on the ball. I think technically it's so much better. And physically, I think, like with anything, whether it's rugby or football or tennis, anything like that, I think as time goes on, everyone gets fitter, stronger. Everyone's trying to make them small gains all the time. So I think that already it's become a lot more physical, a lot fitter, faster players. The intensity is much, much higher than it ever was before. But for me, the quality that is on the ball and the quality of the players is been a real kind of change that I've seen within the game. The players you're playing against now are training full time. They're working on technical skills. They're doing analysis. They're doing so many more things that you wouldn't do if you weren't a full-time professional. And even the children, the kids coming through, should I say, they're able to come into the program and train, but also do their education alongside it. But it's more of a professional outfit, I think. So it's definitely improved hugely. I think the quality you see now when the games are on the TV, it's interesting, it's entertaining to watch. It's faster. It's not that at the standard of the men's, but we're not trying to compare. We're trying to do our own thing, and the game's grown hugely since 2009. You said, was it? Gosh.
Yeah, a long time ago. But what about obviously the facilities? We've seen a lot of teams playing in sort of like National League stadiums. How much of an impact do you think that's had?
Say the question again, sorry.
So sort of, teams are playing in, obviously Bristol moved to Twerton Park this year. How much do you think of an impact that's had on how the game is viewed, maybe?
It's hard, isn't it? I think the game's now being played in sort of men's stadiums, if you like, or being played in better stadiums, better facilities. It does make a massive difference. I think also fans wanting to come and watch games as well, when it's in the men's stadiums, that helps as well. In terms of facilities for Bristol, nothing much has really changed for us over the years. We've been based at SGS most of the time, but we've recently moved our games to Twerton Park, which is more of a football stadium, whereas, at SGS it was, you're training around an athletics track and, it's not really a stadium as such. So I think it gives you a better feel. It's like I said, better for the fans as well, when they come and they can sit in the stands rather than stand around the side of a track as well. It feels more of a professional outfit. I think it makes a difference to, like I said, not only the fans but the players as well when they're playing in a stadium. Ideally for Bristol, it'd be nice if the stadium was in Bristol, not in Bath. And I think that's still an issue within the women's game is, you're still having to work around accommodating other teams. If they're using a pitch, you can't have it, and vice versa. You're still working around other people's availability, which is difficult. But it's nice to see women's teams playing always in the same stadium, or whether it's just it's just for the females. Man City, for example, they always play at the academy training facility at Man City. Fantastic facility, it'll never not be available to them, and same with Reading now playing all their home games at Majestic Stadium, the men's stadium. Brilliant, that's the way it needs to go forward, because it's great to be playing on that type of quality pitch, everything that goes around that off the pitch as well, and for the fans as well to come and watching at a proper stadium. But still got a long way to go, I think, just to make sure that all the teams have the same kind of equality, and that some still aren't struggling to get a great pitch to play on because they have to struggle against, I don't know, men's teams or availability, or I don't know, academy teams playing on pitches you can't play on there, etc. But like I said, it is massively better, and it's again, it just comes down to professionalism. And as a player and as a coach, you do feel like you're more of a professional outfit, and I think fans want to come and see that.
Yeah, sort of staying on that point of like sharing facilities. The league obviously used to be a summer league, and when it got changed to the winter league, did that make it harder?
It does in terms of it's hard. So our stadium, for example, before we went to Turton Park, it's not really great for the winter. It's very exposed. It's very windy. It's not really one for the fans. Fans wouldn't enjoy coming and standing around there. But the worst part now for Bristol is now you've got the stadium. You're in Bath. So like I said, you're still struggling against certain things that are going on, but the summer league was better in terms of just the weather. Games weren't getting called off because the pitches were fine. Whereas now, like you said, if you're not on a great stadium pitch and it's winter and it's rainy and it's cold, more chance of games being cancelled or the pitch cutting up. And unless they're looked after and you've got that kind of professional outfit, like I always say, you're going to struggle. But the summer league was fantastic, just in terms of, like I said, it was. Games weren't going to get called off, and even if you were not in a great stadium, it was nice. It was nice for the fans. Now, if you want them to come watch in the cold weather, the rainy days, they want to come, and there needs to be that hospitality, doesn't it? Where they can pick up a drink and, they can sit in a stand or go inside at half time, which you don't really get in a female game like you do in the men's as much at the moment. And like you said, games could get called off more if you're sharing facilities. Still, unless, like you said, you've got an immaculate carpet of a pitch that is looked after and never played on by anybody else. So, I think, I did enjoy the summer league, I have to admit, rather than the winter one, but, it is what it is.
Of course, yeah. So back when the WSL was formed around 2011, the likes of like Bristol, Liverpool, and like Birmingham, they were competing at like the top end of the table. Why do you think like teams like this haven't been able to sustain that competition?
It's just money, literally. It's finances. It's you have to look at the men's teams that you're affiliated to as well. For example, a Birmingham or a Bristol, they're not in the Premier League. So it's hard for them then to see how a women's side is actually in a higher league than them, if you like. But obviously they don't bring in the income, so it's hard. Then why would they put money? They should obviously put money into the women's game, but I think in their minds, they put all their money into the men's because they want to see their men's team thrive. But if for example, your Bristols are always going to be competing at the higher end of, say, the Championship, but not quite getting into the Premier League or getting there now and again and coming down type of thing, it's hard, isn't it? Because your women's team are kind of going to be kind of along the same way. Kind of on the same way. So it's same with Birmingham. Birmingham are the same, and their men's team they're not a Premier League outfit as such. The women's team follow suit a little bit. So whilst we're both in WSL 1, which is fantastic, I don't think the finances naturally kind of go into the female game in those types of clubs. Whereas if you look at a Man City or an Arsenal, of course, them teams are thriving in the men's league. So they can put some finances into the women's because it doesn't really affect them. So women's team doesn't make much money. We don't get thousands of fans in. So if you treat it as a business, which people higher up in your clubs will, does it make a profit to you? Is it worth the losses for the gains further along the line? And if it's not, because your men's team need to, be having this money or they need to be improving themselves, it's not going to be a priority for them. So I think with teams like us, we naturally always struggle because we're never going to get that input of finances that we probably should have and take a risk and give it and see what happens. Sustainably, it's not going to happen over a long period of time. So I think naturally we're always going to struggle because of those reasons, and the fact that some teams like us, like Birmingham, we're not in London, for example, where you can pick up a load of different players. We're on the outskirts or in the Midlands where, players aren't going to come to you for no money. They're not going to move their lives. You're going to get local players who are homegrown players as opposed to be able to bring in so-and-so for thousands of pounds. They're not going to do that. Whereas in London, you've got your base of a lot of clubs up north. You've got like Liverpool's, your Man City's, your Man United. So it all boils down to money, to be honest with you, and that's the way the game's going. And if you don't have it, you're naturally going to struggle. And like I said, it kind of does come down to a little bit, is your men's team, thriving, or are they also kind of more of a championship side, If that's the case, you're going to struggle to get them like pumping money into your women's side.
Yeah, cool. And do you think that financial gap between those teams at the top and maybe not and at the bottom is a concern for like the competitiveness of the league?
Yeah, I think at one stage the gap was quite small. Like, for example, when Bristol first got into that league, we were competing at the top, and we didn't have the finances that other teams did, but it wasn't as much of a gap at the time. So it was quite competitive league, which is fantastic for everybody. I think now, even more so this year, you've seen the likes of your Man Cities, Chelsea's bringing in Australian internationals, American internationals, not even for a full season, even for just half a season. They're bringing them in. And the difference now is getting even bigger, so you kind of have two leagues in one. You have your top league teams playing against each other, and that's quite exciting. And then you have your bottom league teams who are almost playing their own little league to try and obviously not get relegated and stay up. So there's definitely a massive gap. I think the top games are much more exciting. Before you'd have one team who are just going to win it out and outright, Now you see Chelsea pushing Man City, and then Man City trying to push Chelsea, and then Arsenal come out of nowhere and they go, right, we're going to pump money in. Then all of a sudden Man United form a team, and they're competing. So it's great to see those teams pushing each other, but every time they push each other, everyone else takes a step back, if you like, because they can't compete. And if you try and compete, chances are your team potentially could fold, because you have to be realistic about what you can afford and what you can do. So you have to be very clever, I think, if you're at the kind of in those teams where you can't necessarily pump that money into buying one amazing player. You have to have a bunch of good players rather than just like a superstar. But yeah, I think it's now become a case of 4 or 5 teams that are very exciting to watch against each other. The other games they play, if you have a top team against a bottom team, is it exciting to watch? Probably not. Is it exciting for the league? Probably not, to see one team thumped 8-0. It's not nice for anybody, really, is it? So I think they need to kind of address that a little bit with some rules, maybe, or something around finances, or signing players from abroad. I don't know myself, I'm not going to get into all of that, but I do think maybe things like that would help the competitiveness and allow teams lower down to compete a little bit more and have a half a chance.
Yeah. And finally, what about like the future of women's football then? Where do you see like the next growth step?
Oh God, good question. I don't know exactly. I mean, at the moment, most teams are going down the lines of signing American footballers. It's become, what's happened this year. They're all out this season and they've all decided to come over here. And it's obviously, I think media-wise, it's really boosted the league. So therefore, there's more awareness. People always say you have to see it to be it. So like, obviously, if you're watching games on TV now and there's more publicity around it, I've never seen so many articles on Alex Morgan, who plays for Tottenham, in my life, and she's played about 45 minutes for Tottenham. But, all of a sudden, things like that put teams on the market. It makes people want to go there. It also brings media attention, money, things like that. So I think the media side of it has improved massively because of bringing over these kind of superstars, if you like, So on one hand, it's great because it really kind of builds the league up, and people are talking about it being the best league in the world. I'm not sure it is yet myself, but they're talking about it because you've got the best players over here playing, therefore more media. More media means more money, more awareness, more people at games, So I think it's going down the right route in terms of awareness and kind of getting the game out there for everyone to see. And hopefully that'll help, like I said, in terms of finances for teams, that teams actually bringing in a bit of income as well. But then on the flip side of that, the more internationals you bring in from overseas, the less you use your homegrown players, I guess. So I think there needs to be some sort of kind of rule on the fact you need to bring through some kind of your homegrown players as well, maybe, and not just like go out and sign 20 international players. There needs to be something to protect the English, and the Welsh players within the systems, more so the English because it's an English league. But it's a great question, and like I said, I think maybe just keeping building on the media side of it, the awareness. I think that would make a massive difference at the moment. And maybe just the professionalism, making sure that each team is able to compete with each other, because at the moment, not every team can compete at the same level. We don't have the same amount of staff. We don't have the same equality off the pitch to then be able to compete on the pitch. So if we can build every team up to have the same basics, I know every team will have different levels of, like for example, we could have one analysis and they could have three, but if we have the basics in place and we can do all the medical side of it, the physical side, the analysis side properly, then at least it gives everyone half a chance to kind of compete on the same level-ish, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Right now, I think there's too much of a difference between all the sides. So if that's the case, you don't get a competitive league. So I think that will make a massive difference as well. So that, everyone gets at least half an equal playing field, if that kind of makes any sense. And then from there, it's up to teams whether they, how much more they pump into it. That would hopefully help, I think. Maybe it'll help Bristol anyway.
Yeah, great. That's all the questions for today.
No worries.
Thanks
I
very
hope
much.
it helps.
Yeah, no,
Nice.
really good.